What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, back with another Reaper format video. Now, if you don't know, Reaper format is the format held in March 2006 based around SJC Long Beach, and it basically uses a card pool going up to Shadow of Infinity, which include things like Treeborn Frog. It also has Pot of Avarice to the format as well, and a variety of other cards. And it uses a ban list that's the one right after the GOAT format ban list. So it uses the October 2005 ban list instead, which makes some major changes, cuts things like Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, Delinquent Duo, things like that. And also adds things like Dark Hole and Confiscation. But this format is pretty fun, pretty explosive, and it's actually been a popular format in the past, boosted by some other YouTubers. And, we're trying to make it a popular format yet again, because I do think it is a really fun one. And so I've been showing off decks on the channel for quite a bit. And most of them have been doing some pretty new stuff. But now I figure it's time to go back to sort of one of the older decks that you can play in the format, which is Chaos Control. Now, Chaos Control is not a new deck by any means. People have been playing it in GOAT format and even before that as well. But, it is something that people often overlook in this format in favor of newer strategies like Stein Monarch, which, also isn't really a new deck, but it definitely is new in terms of how it can kill you, because you have access to Cyber Twin Dragon and Cyber End Dragon compared to GOAT, where you don't have access to those. So people have been focusing on things like that. They've been focusing on things that use more of the new cards added to the format. But, Chaos Control is still a very powerful list. It is still considered tier 1, at least in the Reaper Discord server. So, I'm sort of going through those tier 1 strategies there and showing them off. And it still is very good, and it's very easy to see why it is very good. Chaos is just very powerful, having things like Chaos Sorcerer as a boss monster, special summon out for extension, and you playing around with the new lights, the Cyber Dragons here, is very, very good as well. So this is a really good deck. This particular list was piloted by JCVD, not JCDV, JCVD 93 in a previous tournament for the format, and I liked the way it looked, so I figured I'd try playing it. But of course, there are many different ways to play Chaos Control, so if you are interested in this deck, you can sort of adjust it to your liking. But let's go through the card real quick for this list in particular. Firstly, we got Brave the Magical Warrior, Great Dark, and pop your opponent's back row. We've got double Chaos Sork here, which is kind of the boss monster of the deck. You could argue that things like, Zaborg or Jinzo could also be boss monsters, or you could just argue that this deck doesn't really have a boss. It's just trying to, bring out powerful monsters to get, like, advantage and things like that, and also potentially make damage pushes, but you're generally playing a control game, so you're going for a win over a long period of time. So no one monster is going to carry that victory, unlike some other decks in the format. We got triple Cyber Dragon. This is a great light and also very good to special summon out and get more aggressive with. We've got a Cyber Stein here. Cyber Stein very powerful in this format, so you can go into a variety of things in your extra deck with it if you're above that 5,000 life point threshold, and the deck is playing some ways to keep above that threshold. Playing a DD Whirly as well to banish our opponent's stuff, especially like Treeborn Frog, that's very good against. We're playing a double Dekoichi here to draw deeper into our deck. We're playing a Jinzo as well to negate your opponent's traps. We've got a Magician of Faith here to get back powerful spells, and it is a good light. We've got double Mystic Tomato to go into things like Sangan or Reaper, or even the Stein as well. So a lot of different powerful things you can go into off this tomato. Speaking of Sangan and Reaper, we do have those as well. We've got a Tsukiyomi here as well to recycle things like Magician of Faith, and also set down our opponent's Monarchs, which do generally have 1,000 defense, so you can set down a Monarch and hit over it with Suk, which is pretty good. We've got a Zaborg and Thunder Monarch here as well to pop our opponent's stuff. We got, for the spells, Comfy and Dark Hole, of course. Very, very powerful in this form. But we've also got double Creature Swap, which can pair with a variety of things. Can pair with a used up Cyberstein, and can pair with Magician of Faith that's been used up as well. Can pair with Scapegoat, which we are playing as well. So a variety of things that this can be used for, and it can be very powerful when it goes off. We've got a Dark Hole here to clear the board, as I mentioned. We've got Enemy Controller as well to take control of our opponent's stuff. This is really good with the Scapegoat as well. We've got a Giant Tornado here to set back our opponent's spells and traps to hand. We've got a Heavy Storm to destroy those spells and traps. We've got a Limiter Removal here to buff up our machines. Outside of the Cyberstein, which of course you can OTK with the Limiter Removal, we also have 3 Cyber Dragons and 2 Dekoichis, and a Jinzo as well. So you have a fair amount of targets for Limiter Removal, even if you are not going into a Stein fusion there. So this card is pretty good, although at one copy, it's not the most consistent thing in the world. You got a Metamorphosis here to pair with these Scapegoat tokens, but also to pair with things like Magician of Faith, and potentially even a Cyber Dragon. If you meta a Cyber Dragon into a Dark Bolter the Terrible, that can be pretty good as well. There's an MST here to pop our opponent's back row. We've got a Knock to deal set monsters. We got a Pre-Mat to bring back our own stuff. We got Scapegoat, as I mentioned, this can serve as a defensive option. It can pair with Creature Swap. It can be used with your Metamorphosis as well to go into Thousand Eyes. So variety of uses for this card. We got a Snatch Hill to take our opponent's stuff. We've got a Swords Within Light to stall the game a bit. We got double Upstart to try and draw deeper into our deck. We got double Jar of Greed to do much the same. We've got a Torrential Tribute to wipe the boards, and then double Dust Shoot. This card is very good against things like Monarchs, and it's very good going first to have this like accessible. I'm not really sure why they don't have the third Dust Shoot anywhere in the list. I would at least probably add it in the side. But then again, I'm not really too clear on like what some of the side deck is. I get some of it, right? Like the Kaikus are really good against the mirror match. They're also good against like things like Treeborn Frog as well. Monarchs are very good against like back row focused decks. You bring out Mobius and pop away that back row, and that's looking pretty good. Trunade can be very good against back row heavy decks as well. BrainCon, I guess it's just a powerful card to have in here. If you do want to lean more into the Monarch strategy here, it's going to be good to bring in. You get triple Royal Decree for trap focused decks, double Sakuretsu for more aggressive decks like Warriors, and triple Threatening Roar for more OTK decks. I'm not really sure why Level Limit Area B is in this deck. I guess if you're signing in another copy of Trunade, you can slow down the game a bit and then, Trunade back the level limit to do things. But it just feels kind of awkward in this deck. So instead of this level limit, I probably would have done a third Dust Shoot. But then again, I didn't make this deck, and JCVD93 managed to get second place in a big tournament with it, so they probably knew something that I do not here. But very interesting inclusion. If anyone can tell me why the level limit is here in this deck in particular, then let me know. But, I think it is a very interesting inclusion, so I never really went into it myself, and I'm not sure what case you would, but definitely let me know if you know. But for the Fusion deck here, it's pretty much a standard sort of like Fusion deck. I didn't really change it at all here. That's just sort of like a toolboxy Fusion deck that, you've seen in a variety of these videos already. You got Blue Eyes, 4,500 attack, beaten in. Setter Blader's third effect can come up occasionally, but realistically, you're never going into this. Just nice to have sometimes. Yeah, it's a level 7, so there's nothing in your deck that you're metaing into it with. You're not metaing into the Cyber End Dragon, the Cyber Twin Dragons, but you are likely bringing these out with Stein, and if you do bring these out, you can go for a major OTK push. You've got a Dark Bolt of the Terrible here to negate your opponent's monster effects. You've got Dark Blade the Dragon Knight, 2 banish cards from Grave. You've got a Dragoness for weird meta levels. You've got a Fiend Skull Dragon here to negate targeted traps as well as flip effects. You've got a Gatling Dragon here to pop your opponent's stuff and potentially even your own sometimes. You got a Dragoon to prevent targeting effects. We've got a Reaper to get under some floodgates and also rip cards out of hand potentially. We've got a Ryu Sentry here to negate traps and also spells that target. We've got a Last Warrior from Another Planet to stop summons, and we've got a Thousand Eyed Restrict to suck up our opponent's stuff. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck actually plays. Okay, we got our first game here against Dump Truck, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. And this is a pretty good one, so I'm excited to dive into it. If you enjoy this sort of Reaper content and Reaper gameplay, definitely subscribe to the channel. We're going to be having a lot more. And if you enjoy retro Yu-Gi-Oh content in general, definitely subscribe as well. Because, I cover formats outside of Reaper as well. And we're trying to reach 1,500 subs this month, so, you subscribing can definitely help us get there. But they're going to open up with a Comfy, which is one of the most powerful things you can open with in this format. They send the Breaker instead of like the Cyberstein. So that to me says I can't go for a Cyberstein anytime soon because that back row must be able to deal with it in some way. So yeah, it's a bit tricky. They're just going to set 2 pass back to me. I draw Sook here. It's a bit awkward. I could potentially just go for Cyberstein anyways, but going into a bit of a lower impact monster like Dark Balter, that could be something that I do. But yeah, and I decide ultimately just to go into it. And instead of going into like Dark Balter, I go into Gatling here instead. So I'm worried about like if they've got a way to, take control of whatever fusion monster I bring out off Stein. And I feel like Gatling Dragon does sort of get around that a little bit because if they do take this thing, they can't like ram it into Stein. But then they can still attack directly, but it's not lethal as well. Like Cyber Twin would be lethal. So whereas this is not. And I don't know, maybe I could have gone for something else here, but I am very worried about that back row. And so I don't want to bring out a fusion monster that can just kill me on the crackback. So I figure I'll go for this. Even if an attack doesn't go through here, I figure I can still pop that set and potentially get in. So it's a bit tricky. And unfortunately, I think this was kind of the only option I had, which is kind of rough, but it is how it goes sometimes. And we're going to pop both that set monster and our own Stein. So we feel good about that. We can also get them out of Stein range there. And I'm feeling okay about this. I set Jar, I set enemy controller, pass back to them. Enemy controller can protect us a little bit if they do have a way to take this and also can just summon out another monster on top of it. They're going to go for Exile though. They're going to pop the Gatling, then go for Premat here on the Tomato. And that's a bit rough for us. They can attack in for 14. I could potentially just Econ here And then I can potentially use pre-mat twice if I draw into like a True Nade or something. But I have to draw into like True Nade exactly to make this play worth it. And even then, it's like not really that worth it because I don't really have 2 monsters in grave that I'd want to do that with. So I'm just going to take the 14. And they pass back to us, and we draw True Nade, of course. You know, I bring up that line, and then, of course, we draw the True Nade. But nothing much we can do about that here. And again, I don't really think it even would have been the best if I had, like, you know, done this. But I'm just going to jar and draw one deeper just to see what else we get. We get Limiter, and unfortunately, this won't quite do it. We could, like, Limiter on Stein, but other than that, doesn't really do much. We could also pre-mat for Breaker, just hit over the Tomato. That might be something. I'm also trying to, like, calculate, like, okay, if I set Tsukiyomi, and then I, you know, econ to take the Mystic Tomato, and then I, like, you know, pre-map back a monster here, can I do stuff? And realistically, there's nothing that can actually, you know, get me to win the game this turn, and that's what I really want this turn, so, yeah, it doesn't really quite work out there. Gatling was not properly summoned off Cyberstein, so you can't actually, you know, bring it back up pre-mat, or else we just have this game unlocked. We're just going to bring back this Breaker here, and now we're going to attack into the Mystic Tomato. I'm not too afraid of anything that they can bring out here. They're just going to bring out a Sangan, and I feel ultimately okay about that. We're just going to set this Sook. They're going to go for Raigeki Break here, pop our Econ, and that's really rough. I could have potentially gone for True Nade here to get the Raigeki Break off field, but either way, they would have chained Raigeki Break and popped the Econ because the Econ was on field already, so not really much point in doing that. Yeah, so it didn't quite work out for us there. But hopefully they won't have anything to, like, super punish this. If they got Zaborg, then that's really bad for us. Dark Hole should also do it. If they Dark Hole the board, then search off the Sangan, then that should be the end of the game here. So they go for a Tomato, and they also go for a Chaos monster here, probably the play around Karibo. But I'm very happy about this because this, to me, tells me that they're on Chaos, which was not necessarily known throughout the rest of the first game. So now we're going to side in the Kaikus here, just in case, you know, we can banish lights and darks and do things like that against them. So I feel pretty good about that. They also didn't see that we are on Chaos ourselves, so I feel pretty good about that too. We're just going to set this TT, pass back to them. We could have potentially set the Sook to set up for the Zaborg, but I don't really think that makes sense because they can just special summon out Sidra if they do have it. So I'd rather shut off their Sidras now and set up for a Sidra of our own. If they bring out like Reaper, we can TT, so I feel pretty good about this overall. They're just going to set one pass back to us. We draw Upstart. We're just going to go for the Upstart here, see what we get. We draw a Dekoichi here. We're going to go for the Sidra, tribute that off for Zaborg to pop their set, and I'm very glad I did that because it was a magical merchant, which could have been really powerful if it managed to go off. But we're just going to attack directly for 24, pass back to them. They've got a Snap Steal here. They're able to attack in for 2,400, and we will be gaining 1,000 here, which is kind of nice. And it's a bit tricky, this situation, because we have multiple options to go for here. We could just summon out Sook, flip down the Zaborg, attack into the Zaborg. I don't necessarily like that because then they've still got their set, which could be, you know, another merchant potentially. It could be something else. So I don't necessarily want to go for the Sook play. We could just play a passive, potentially set the Reaper, and just pass back to them. We're gaining 1,000 off that snatch every turn. So if they don't have a way to get rid of our Reaper, then we're feeling good about that. The TT makes that kind of awkward, though. I don't necessarily want to, you know, just commit the Reaper into a TT, although I might have to at some point. Yeah, I think the best play here is actually just to go Dark Hole and then attack him with Reaper. Try and rip a card out of hand. It does leave us a little bit vulnerable to damage, but I do feel like, you know, ripping cards out of hand is what we want to be doing at this point. And we do have TT in case they summon out a big thing to hit over the Reaper. But other than that, I feel pretty good about this. We hit a Cyber Dragon, which I'm not too upset about hitting there. They're going to banish a Light and a Dark and bring out a Chaos Orc here. They're going to banish the Reaper. And I choose not to TT here because I'm like, well, okay. If they commit another thing to attack in now, then I TT, right? Because I feel like that's pretty good for us. If they, you know, it's basically a 2-for-1 trade at that point. And then they'll be pretty low on cards. But instead of attacking, they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Tomato, which is okay here. I have to think about what to do here because I likely will be firing TT on this following turn. And so I got to think about which of my monsters I'm most okay with losing here. And if they don't summon out anything, I want to sort of figure out, like, okay, what do I want to do here? So I bring out Tomato. I just attack into the set. I think this is a bit of a mistake on my part because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to, like, bait out the Chaos Orc banishing the Tomato, and then they'll summon something else out to attack, and then I TT the board. That's what I'm trying to bait out here. But I think in hindsight, like, they could just keep playing it safe and not really do much. And in that case, I want the Dekoichi set instead of just the Tomato summoned and banished. But we hit Treeborn Frog, so it's not really that valuable either way there. They go for MST on our back row, and that is really bad for me now. They do banish the Tomato here, and they're just going to pass. Okay, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is pretty rough. We draw into that Dust Shoot, which, quite unfortunate. Where were you earlier, Dust Shoot? But we're just going to set the Dekoichi. They go for a Exiled Force here, attacking for 23. And now things are pretty bad for us here. We draw a creature swap, so we can do something here. We can go for a Tsukiyomi, flip down that Sork, go for the swap, and then end phase, the Suk will return to hand. It's kind of like what we had to do. We could have also set the Suk and gone for the creature swap there. But, like, then we don't get the Suk back, so I don't necessarily want to open up plays, like, with Monarchs or things like that. They go for Dark Hole here, wiping away that Sork, attacking in for 15 with the DD Warrior Lady there, passing back to us. We draw a Tomato here. And what I want to do, I just want to set the Tomato pass back to them. I figure they'll likely banish with the Warrior Lady here, which is ultimately okay because it's still clearing a monster from their side of the field, and they will indeed banish. Oh, they have returned, though. Yeah, that's a bit rough for us. We wanted to, save the heavy for a more valuable board, especially because it didn't seem like that back row really did much, but that back row is coming back to bite us now, and they will be able to go for a return play, bring back a Warrior Lady, a Cyber Dragon, and a Dekoichi, and that'll just be the end of the game there. So I think that is one of the weaknesses of the more control version of the deck. It seems like Dump Truck was on a Chaos Return style deck, which I do think is generally better in this format, since explosive decks are generally the decks that are doing the best in this format. Just being able to, have a way to just win the grind game with a return is very, very powerful. And I think because you have things like Treeborn Frog that can just set up Monarchs so well, like, you don't necessarily want to get in a grind game with Monarchs. Of course, you can banish the Treeborn Frog with a Sork, so, you've got that aspect to them. But I feel like games can really go out of control if your opponent has just one way to bring out a Monarch, because Monarch can also beat over your Chaos Sorks, which is obviously not the best. And it's just like, in a grind game, I don't necessarily think, Chaos is very good, don't get me wrong, but, like, in a grind game, I think you potentially be at a disadvantage against some decks that just have this sort of like instant win con button in them. So I do like the Chaos Return version a little bit better. So I am glad we got to show off like a pseudo mirror match, but I do think that in this mirror match, or it's not quite a mirror match because the decks, this deck's not playing Return, that deck is, but I do think that Return versions are just a little bit better here. But yeah, that's going to be game one here. And this wasn't the only game I got against Dump Truck. They actually wanted to test out how this Chaos deck did against a different deck. So let's dive into that game now and see how we do. Okay, we got our next game against Dump Truck here, and we did manage to win the Rock, Paper, Scissors, so we will be going first here. And let's see how we do. This is a pretty good hand. Dekoichi is a good start. We're just going to start by setting Dekoichi, setting a Jar of Greed, passing back to them. No need to really commit more into like Heavy Storm. If they've got Comfy, they've got Comfy, right? But we've got Jar to sort of recover from that a little bit. So I'm feeling okay about this. We've also got Dekoichi to recover from that a bit as well. They go for this Exiled Force, popping our Dekoichi there. Which is a bit scary, but they choose to just go for the Sangen, doing the like safer play here. I think that's fine. They don't know what back row we have, and if we do have a back row to stop Stein, they obviously don't want to go into Stein. So they're just going to set one, pass back to us, and I'm feeling pretty good about this. We go for a Jar here. Draw into a creature swap, which is not really the best against a Sangan. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go for MST here, go for Sidra. I want that MST Engrave because I want a Spell Engrave in case we want to go for the Magician of Faith here. They're going to just get back a Treeborn Frog, which I'm ultimately okay with. I set the Magician of Faith, pass back to them. I figure if they summon a monster here attack, we get back MST, which is ultimately okay. We've got Snatch in that case as well to then get even more aggressive here. But if they do something else and they just like set a monster, for instance, we can go for Knock. And then, get back the Knock if we so wish. So we've got a couple different options with the Magician of Faith. Unfortunately, that Dark Hole is going to clear away both our monsters, and now we're in a bit of a tough spot. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We do indeed have a Light and a Dark Engrave, so we're just going to go for it. Go for this Chaos Sork here, and we're going to attack in for 2,300. And they will indeed take that, so I'm feeling very good about that. They're going to draw for turn. They're going to go for Braincon here to take control of that Sork, banish the Sork with its own effect, and then just pass back to us. We draw Dust Shoot, which is really perfect here. Set the Dust Shoot. They go for a Regeki Break on the Dust Shoot, popping that. And that's a bit unfortunate because we would have been able to potentially use it on this following turn. But it did at least trade for the break, so I'm okay with that. They bring back the Frog here. They set one, pass back to us. We draw a creature swap. These creature swaps are kind of rotten in hand with Treeborn Frogs on our opponent's side of the field. And it's one of the reasons why, I'm not really the biggest fan of creature swap in this deck. I do play it throughout the games here because I do think it's good to show off what this deck's trying to do. But like, if your opponent's able to bring out Treeborn Frog, which many decks are able to do, you know, Creature Swap gets so much worse. So I don't really think it's the best thing in the world in this format, but you know, we are playing it, and we set one as a bluff here because we do have another in hand, and we're not likely going to be using like double Creature Swap at any point in the near future. So I figure it's good to just bait out back removal, and we did bait that out with that Mobius coming down there. We will Snatch Steal the Mobius, just attack in for 24. It's basically the best thing that we can do here. And then main two, we just set the Dust Shoot as a bluff here. If they've got heavy, they've got heavy. We probably lose the game either way. So I figure it's fine just setting the bluff. The Dust Shoot isn't going to really do anything in hand or on field, so it's fine just having it set here, in my opinion. They bring back the Treeborn in their standby here, and then they go for a BrainCon on our Mobius here. And now they're able to attack in for 24, dropping us down to 22. And now they tribute out a Thestalos. So maybe we should have kept the Dust Shoot in hand just as a, you know, fodder for a Thestalos potentially. Maybe we wouldn't have had to pitch the Creature Swap there, but realistically, it won't really matter here that much. We draw a Chaos Orc. We've only got one light monster in grave, and that should just do it. We admit defeat, move on to game 2. So I don't really think we sided too much in here against Monarchs. I think we might have brought in a Kaiku. I don't quite remember. I think we're relatively good. I think I sided out some of the spawn trap removal, maybe, seeing that they were all unchainables, but we still do have this True Nade here, so maybe I didn't do that. But we're just going to set the Sook, set the MST here, pass back to them. And they're going to set one, set another, pass back to us. We just go for MST in the end phase in case it is a chainable, and it was a heavy storm. So I'm not too upset about seeing that gone. We will go for a Sangan here, then go for a knock on the Treeborn and attack in for 11. We could have also flipped up the Sook on the Sangan, flipped that down, gotten in for 11. Sook would have bounced back to hand, be a little bit more resilient against like Dark Hole, but I want to have some sort of ambiguity here based on like what we have, so that way they don't know one way or another. Because who knows, this set could be something powerful that they have to deal with in some way. So I figure this is fine. If they go for Dark Hole on this board, I'm also very okay with that because then Sangan gets a search. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. They go for MST on the True Nade. That's perfectly fine. It was there just to, you know, bait back or removal if they had it, but if they don't, then I can just go for True Nade on the following turn. They go for a BrainCon here, and that's pretty rough. If we had gone for Sook flipping down Sangan, we wouldn't have had to worry about that. So maybe that was the correct play. But I still think this is fine. They go for Hot S here, and I'm very okay with this because they're just going to attack over the Tsukiyomi, and it won't flip down the Hot S, unfortunately, but we will be able to just Dark Hole on the following turn. I'm much happier that they went for, you know, this play, getting rid of the Sook, rather than, you know, maneuvering some play to get over the Sangan with the Hot S, which would have been a lot worse for us. So they're just going to pass back to us. We get a limiter removal, which doesn't really help us here right now, but we're just going to bring out the DD Warrior Lady, attack in for 15. And the reason we got DD Warrior Lady is I figure like it's a very, very good target for us right now. They have to deal with this in some way. If they deal with it by battle and we banish their card, that's also pretty good because they're at a very low resource point. But if they banish it, or not banish it, but if they deal with it in some other way, that gets it engraved, then we've got our Chaos Orc online. So I figured the DD Warrior Lady was the best pick off the Sangan there. But they're going to go for BrainCon here, take control of that Warrior Lady there, just get in for 15, which is a bit unfortunate. And then main two, they're going to tribute that. Tribute set. Okay, that tells us that that's probably Zaborg. You wouldn't really do that unless it was Zaborg or maybe Sidra, but even if it's Sidra, you probably want to summon the Sidra as opposed to setting it. We draw a Scapegoat here, which isn't really going to do much right now, but we can bring out this Chaos Orc here and try and attack over their set. Looks like they've got an Econ to switch that to defense, which is quite unfortunate for us. We're going to set the Scapegoat, pass back to them. They're going to flip up this Zaborg here, attack in to our Chaos Orc, and pass back to us. We didn't go for Scapegoat in the end phase there because I don't want them to sort of like just top deck Dark Hole at some point, wipe out our Scapegoat before we really need to use it. But we top deck into Creature Swap, which then makes me really sad because if we had gone for Scapegoat there, we would have been able to switch one of the tokens to attack, Creature Swapped into Zaborg, and then gotten in for 24. That being said, I still think the correct play here is to go for the Scapegoats now and then go for Creature Swap. We don't get in the damage, but I think like there are just plenty of things that they could draw to commit to board here, like another Treeborn Frog, etc., which we do not want our opponent to give us off swap. So we have to do this now. They'll set one, pass back to us. We draw a Premature Burial here. We could potentially pre-map back the Sork, but I don't want to play into a TT here, so I'd rather just attack in with the Zaborg here. We could also, yeah, I mean, that's basically the only thing we have. They're going to take that and pass back to us. Or we pass back to them, that is. They go for Soul Exchange on the Zaborg, going for the Thestalos here, and they rip the Premature Burial. That is very unfortunate. We really wanted that to bring back the Sork. Maybe I should have said it for that reason, but, you know, they could have easily had Mobius here instead of a Thestalos, so, you know, it's tough to tell with these sorts of decks. We set a dust shoot because it's just a dead bluff, really. And they're going to go for breaker here. They're going to pop the dust shoot. I mean, that's okay with us. Like, we can't really do anything about that either way. We draw a Cyber Dragon here, which is a bit awkward. We can't bring that out with the Scapegoat token. We just do. Okay. This was just something that neither of us caught here, I guess. That there is still a token on field. I mean, let's see if it really would have changed much. They've got Warrior Lady in hand here, so next turn they're getting in for a fair bit. They could have drawn into something, though. They could have drawn into, like, Reiki Break or something and popped the Sidra. So, yeah, this was an illegal play that caused me to win the game here. But neither of us noticed it at the time for some reason. So, we were playing late at night, so, you know, it makes sense that neither of us saw that. But that's how these games go sometimes. Yeah, you know, we are playing on a manual simulator, so that isn't always caught, but I do think the benefits of a manual simulator is a bit better than the downsides to it. But I think we probably would have won that game there no matter what happened, but there were some draws that Dump Truck could have gotten that could have stymied us a little bit here. But I think we still were likely winning that one. For this one, we could go Sidra into Zaborg, but what I'd rather do here is just go Sidra into Dark Balzer and then hit over their set. We do know that they're playing a ton of Treeborn Frogs, and they've got no back row here. So I do feel like that could reasonably be a Treeborn Frog, and in that case, I want to get rid of it with Balzer so it won't come back. Unfortunately, it's a Warrior Lady, but that's still okay because we are able to negate its effect, so Balzer remains on field. Now, if they've got a Sidra here that's really bad for us, and they do indeed have the Sidra, so Sidra will come down, hit over the Balzer. We'll take 100 from that. And now we're in a bit of an awkward spot. They're going to go for a Thestalos here, and they're going to rip a Heavy Storm out of hand. We also could have chained Jar of Greed to the Thestalos. I feel like every card in our hand was like pretty strong in some way. But this board wasn't really getting as much use right now, neither was the Heavy. So I feel like we are ultimately fine here, just keeping the Jar down for when we need it. We draw Upstart here. We go for the Jar, draw into a TT here. That's pretty good. Now we go for the Upstart because I didn't want to use up the Upstart to gain them 1,000 if I didn't have to. Because it's kind of awkward because they could be on Stein. We haven't seen Stein out of them yet. We've just seen the Monarch side of this deck. But we did see Last Will in game 1, and so Stein is definitely an option. So I just decided to set 2 because they've got one set of their own. If it is a Heavy, then we go, I mean, we just get blown out here if it's Heavy, but, you know, we can't play around that either way. Because we have to set the TT here, and I want to play around if they've got like an MST or Dust Tornado as the back row there. And it looks like it is indeed the Dust Tornado, so they're going to get rid of the MST. So we got lucky on that 50-50 there. Because we definitely do want to keep the TT around. And they're just going to attack him with Thestalos. Set a monster, pass back to us. We didn't go for Dark Hole last turn because I wanted to get more value off the Dark Hole, and this is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted there. We hit in to the Thestalos and the Tomato, so I'm feeling very good about that. We bring out this Sangan here, attack in for 1,000, get them back down to their starting life total, and pass back to them. They go for a set monster here, pass back to us. We draw a breaker here. Now we've got two options. We can go for breaker, pop that back row, or we can go for Zaborg, pop the monster. I'm just going to go for Zaborg if it is Treeborn. They've got a back row here, so they've got to use that up at some point. But it looks like it's just an exiled force, which we are perfectly fine popping with Zaborg. And we're going to search out a DD Warrior Lady here. I want to cut them off of like Treeborn Frog access. It's also another light, but you know, we've got plenty of lights in grave, so I don't necessarily need to get another light set up, but like, I think it's also just a very good card individually. I could have gone for Reaper, though, to set up for plays, you know, ripping cards out of hand and stuff. But I feel like Warrior Lady is perfectly fine here. They're going to go for Soul Exchange on the Zaborg, go for the Thestalos here. We go for TT there, so even though they will be able to rip a card out of hand, we are able to get rid of that Zaborg. They rip the Warrior Lady, unfortunately, but again, it's a light engrave, so I'm not too upset about that. We go for a breaker here, and we're not going to use the effect to pop before the battle phase. I figured they're not playing Saku or things like that that would conflict with the Treeborn Frog, so we can just pop that back row after the battle phase if it is something that doesn't do anything. Looks like it is something that does something, but either way here, it wouldn't have really mattered. They would have just changed it to the activation of breaker, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. They just draw and pass, so either they drew into a Monarch or they drew into a Sidra, which is dead. Either way here, we're just going to bring out the Tomato, set the Dust Shoot, pass back to them. They could potentially draw up to 4. We'd never know. They're going to set 1 here, pass back to us. We're just going to attack in with the Tomato here for 14. Now we get a little bit of a choice. We could potentially keep the Magician of Faith in hand, or we could commit it to field. They've got a Dark Hole. That's really bad. They have not used up Dark Hole yet. But I figured they probably don't have a Dark Hole on hand. I mean, they could have just been waiting like we did earlier. But if they do have a Dark Hole, then they probably don't have much else to do. And I still feel fine. You know, like with the top deck war in this case. We got our Chaos Monsters online. We've got plenty of monsters in hand, or not in hand, but in deck that can like beat in and deal damage here. So I feel ultimately okay about committing the Magician of Faith because we likely will be able to win with that Magician of Faith if we get it to resolve. So we're just going to set that pass back to them. They are going to just pass back to us. Okay, I feel really good about this. We're going to go for the Comfy first, just to see what they've got in hand. So that way we can sort of inform our Magician of Faith ad if we want to go for that in main 1. So we get a peek at their hand. We see that they've got a Dark Ruler and a Comfy here. And I think of those, we'd rather just pitch the Dark Ruler. Yes, they could attack into Magician of Faith with a monster and then Comfy whatever else remains in hand. But they're going to be very low on life points here after this. So I'm not too concerned if they do that. And what I'm much more concerned about is if they somehow manage to get a Dark Ruler Hades on field and hit over like our Tomato or our Moth. So I feel like hitting out that Dark Ruler is going to be the one to go for here. So we get rid of the Dark Ruler. They can't bring it back because it can't be revived from grave. So I feel really good about this. We attack in for 14 with the Tomato there and pass back to them. We chose not to go for Magician of Faith because right now there isn't really much we can do. Or, I mean, there are plenty of things we can do. We can get back like MST to pop the back row, etc. But I feel like it's fine just holding it for a turn. If they attack into the Magician of Faith here, again, they're kind of forced to use up their Comfy to rip that card out of our hand. That's 1,000 damage when they're very, very low on life points here. So I feel fine about this. They've got a Dust Tornado to get rid of the Dust Shoot, which I'm perfectly fine with. They special summon outside right here, attack in to the Mystic Tomato. We'll take 7. We're going to bring out another Mystic Tomato here. We know the hand is Comfy, so we know that there's nothing that can stop this play. We'll flip up this Magician of Faith, go for the meta on the Magician of Faith, go into Thousand Eyes, and suck up that Cyber Dragon, attack in for game. So, yeah, that's going to do it here. And I think that this was a much better showing for the deck. I do think the deck is a little bit awkward. Sometimes you draw hands that, like, don't really do much at the moment, and you've got to sort of stay alive long enough to actually make sure that they do go through. It's tough playing a control deck like this in a very aggro format like Reaper, but as this game does show, and as JCVD's Tournament Success shows, you can definitely do it and still have major success there. But this wasn't the last game that I got with the deck. I've got one more match to show off for you, so let's dive into that now. Okay, we got a game here against Highland93, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on, and we're going to be diving in to the game here. So it seems like they're relatively new with their deck based on the chat on the side, but they should still be pretty good with this, hopefully. I mean, we'll have to see what they do. But either way, this should be a good sort of showing for our deck, at least, no matter how well or poorly they play. So they're going to go for a Sakuretsu here on our side route. We're just going to set a Jar and an Econ, pass back to them. I'm going to flip the Tsukoichi here, draw 1, go for a DD Warrior Lady here, attack in for 2,900, and that will indeed go through. So they're just going to end turn, pass back to us. We draw a Sangan here, which is pretty good. But we do want to deal with the Warrior Lady before anything happens with the Sangan here. So we're going to go for Jar of Greed. See what we get. We draw MST. Now, we could potentially go for MST right now on their back row. But I feel, honestly, we can just save the MST because they're a powerful back row that they might have that, you know, we want to sort of get out of them first. So we're going to go for Snatch on the DD Warrior Lady here, attacking the Tsukoichi. This will clear both of them because we can just banish both. And they won't gain the life points from Snatch later as well. If they did have MST to stop this play, we could have Econ'd, tributed the Sangan, taken control of the DD Warrior Lady here, and crashed that way. So it still ultimately would have turned out fine, even if the back row is like MST or Dust Tornado. I'm just going to set the MST now, and they're going to go for a Smashing Ground here. We're going to go for Econ, tribute the Sangan, take control of the Sidra, and as a commenter pointed out in our previous video, this will actually destroy the Sidra, because the Smashing Ground will resolve after the Econ, and Cyber Dragon is the monster on our side of the field with the highest defense. So we go for that, and they assume that we're switching it to defense there. But if we were switching to defense, we would not have changed the Econ to the Smashing. So this is, they summon out Dawn before the chain, like, fully resolves, because we also have to search off Sangan here. So this is a bit of a kind of scuffed game state a little bit. And if I'd known that they were going for Dawn, I would have searched out Tomato, because Tomato can just crash into the Dawn. We've got MST for that back where they've got there. So we can do stuff with that. But I'm going to play it as if I didn't know that they were summoning out Dawn afterwards, which would have happened if, you know, this sort of had properly resolved at the correct sequencing here. So we're going to add a DD Warrior Lady here, because, again, I feel like this is one of the most flexible cards that you can add here to then get in, you know, banish a card potentially, and potentially set up a Light and Grave, although we do have a Light and Dark already. But they are going to go for the Dawn's Luke here, and they're going to rip a card out of hand after dealing 14. They do rip the DD Warrior Lady out of hand, but we do have a pre-mat to bring back the Warrior Lady, so that's pretty good. We go for MST on the back row, and we see that they're on return. That's a bit scary for us, because it means that, you know, DD Warley banishing their card might not turn out the best for us. We have a couple different options here. We can go for pre-mat on the Warrior Lady. I think we do that every time. Although we could also go Sidra. That might be the move instead. I think we're doing the Warrior Lady because it's a little bit more flexible. And we're going to attack in to the Dawn there. Deal 100, not banish. Now, something we could do here is we could True Nade back the pre-mat to hand. Just have it on reserve for next turn. But we have seen that they've played a wide number of back row here. And so I'd rather save the True Nade for both bouncing the pre-mat and dealing with their back row at the same time. I'm going to set this Magician of Faith as well. Yes, they could blow us up with Dark Hole, but we are low enough life points that I do want this as a blocker potentially. And there are plenty of powerful spells that we can get back off of it. So they're going to set when we draw a Tomato. And unfortunately, no matter how many times I think about like, well, okay, if we True Nade back the pre-mat, go for pre-mat again, and potentially, you know, Magician of Faith back the True Nade to get another monster here and go for big damage, potentially crashing the Warrior Lady into the set and getting in for damage that way. It did not add up to 6,800 life points, no matter how much I calculate on this graveyard in this board state. So unfortunately, I won't do that. What I will do here is I'm going to think a bit about this. I'm going to go for a Tomato and just attack into the set here. The only thing that really punishes this play is, I think, Cyberjar. But, like, I feel like they're probably not... I mean, they could be on Cyberjar. That is pretty good for Bazoo. So, I mean, if it is Cyberjar, it's Cyberjar. And I don't get them off. So, that's kind of unfortunate here. But hopefully I get other monsters that can attack in. But luckily for us, it is Koichi. And we're going to attack in for 14 to drop our opponent down to 54. We also could have True Naded before we attacked in, just in case it was something we did want to banish off the Warrior Lady. Like a Sangam, potentially. But I feel like this was ultimately okay. And I don't think it's that bad for us that we did this. But they're going to go for the Bazoo here, banish 3, and now they're going to have a choice here. Did they attack into the Tomato, the Warrior Lady, or the set? They're going to attack into the Tomato here. We'll be able to get out a monster from deck here. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. We get out another Tomato because it's more damage. And they're just going to pass back to us, and I think we probably should have the game on lock here because we can just flip up the Magician of Faith, grab back the Snatch, and then we can take control of the Bazoo here, buff it up to 3,400 potentially, or go for like True Nade plays to bring back another monster, play around like Karibo, I guess. But I think realistically we can play around, let's see. We don't quite have enough for playing around. Yeah, if they've got one Karibo, then we actually don't have lethal here because we maximum have 5,300 if they've got a Karibo. But, you know, I can't really worry about that too much. Yeah, I really can't worry about that too much. So I've just got to sort of go for the Snatch play here and then get in for lethal damage. So yeah, we were thinking about the Karibo stuff, but again, you know, I can only get 5,300 max, not 5,400. So it is what it is. But it looks like they didn't have the Karibo because they just scoop it up there. So we are going to be going second here because we won game 1. And this is a pretty good opener for going second, all things considered. We sided in Threatening Roars because I want a way to, you know, sort of stop the returns. I could have brought in Decrees instead of Threatening Roar, but I'm worried that they might have like Dust Tornadoes or MSTs or something. Just be more proactive against Decree because that is a weakness of Bazoo Return. So I choose to bring in the Roars instead, and we'll see if it works out for us here. They're just going to set 3, you know, bring out the Zalug, pass back to us. I go for a True Nade here to bounce back their entire field because I really want to land an attack in against that Zalug. There's an argument for not doing this though, because if they do get in for a Zalug hit, then they get a Chaos Orc Engrave, and that's a Light and Dark Engrave that we can then use to bring out a Chaos Orc and go for plays here. So there is the argument not to do this and save the True Nade for later, which I think might be the correct play in hindsight. But I wasn't really thinking about that here. I was just thinking like, okay, I've got to get rid of that Zalug. And, you know, once I do, I should be in a pretty good position here. And we'll likely draw into a dark at some point later in the game. So I was fine doing this. I set a T-Roar here, pass back to them. They go for a Snap Steal on the Cyber Dragon here, also bringing out a Kaiku. And that's really unfortunate for us. I really need to get rid of that Kaiku because that Kaiku really messes up my plans here. So what I have to do here, I think, is I'm going to go for Threatening Roar to stop the Kaiku from banishing the Warrior Lady, because Warrior Lady is another out to Kaiku. I want to sort of get the pressure on that Kaiku as much as possible because both the back row are real. I need to burn through it as quickly as possible. And we draw another Cyber Dragon here, which is okay, but not really the best here. We're going to attack into the Kaiku. They do have the Sakuretsu there, which is a bit unfortunate, and we'll pass back to them. They go for a Sangan here, getting very aggressive here, but, you know, they've got the aggressive pressure. We've got a hand of bricks, so makes sense. They're going to get in for a ton of damage here. We are gaining 1,000 here, so if we do draw Stein off the top, it's not like terrible for us. I'm not sure we necessarily want to commit that into a back row here. We draw into a torrential here. We bring out the Sidra, and now we'll try to attack into the Kaiku yet again. And that will indeed go through. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. We set this TT here, pass back to them. And they've got Dust Tornado for the TT here. Popping that, they're going to bring out a Mystic Swordsman level 2. They're going to crash these Sidras together and attack in for 1,900. Now, this is a very fragile board state for them to be in. You know, many cards in our deck do allow us to come back from this situation. Jar of Greed's not one of them. So if they've got any monster here to commit in addition to this board, then that's going to be pretty bad for us. But it looks like they're setting here, passing back to us. And I feel very good about that. So we're going to draw into Mystic Tomato here. We're just going to go for Jar of Greed, see what else we draw. We draw into Reaper here. I'm just going to summon out the Tomato attack into the Mystic Swordsman level 2. No point to setting the Reaper because that just gets eaten by the Swordsman level 2. So I feel like I have to do this. And I'm just going to pass back to them. They've got a Dekoichi, so it looks like they were a bit scared of the back row last turn, else they would have gone for lethal that way. They're going to bring out this Wang Yu here and attack in to our Tomato. So unfortunately, nothing we bring out can actually save us here. Even if we had brought out Sangan, we didn't have Karibos in the deck, so we can't protect our life points that way. So that's just going to be the end of the game there. So, you know, I think we bricked a little bit, but again, there were potentially things we could have done if we let the Don Salute hit in. Now, we didn't know about the Kaiku at the time. Kaiku, in hindsight, would have definitely banished the Dark from our grave, so it wouldn't have actually mattered there either way. But, you know, sometimes that is how it is. And you can't really play around that too much. We go for an upstart here, set Jar, set Scapegoat, pass back to them. And they're going to go for a Kaiku plus a set. Kaiku on this board state is not really as threatening. So I'm feeling perfectly fine about this. They set another pass back to us. We draw another T-Roar here. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. Our first T-Roar of the game. I guess I'm mixing up this game and the last one. We just bring out a Sidra here, attack into the Kaiku. They've got a Sakuretsu for that, so they'll be able to clear the Sidra. We set the T-Roar here because I feel like they probably don't have Heavy as their other back row here, or else they would have gone for Heavy last turn and done the play there. Maybe they were waiting for us to commit a real back row, but all of our back row is chainable to Heavy, so also even if they do drop Heavy here, I'm feeling very good about that. They attack in for 18, and this time I will use the Scapegoat here, so that way we keep our Sidra in grave there. So they're going to get rid of one of our tokens here and pass back to us. We draw Econ, which is really good here. We're going to go for Jar to see what else we draw. We draw into a Sangan there. We're going to go for Econ now, take control of the Kaiku, tribute that Kaiku for a Zaborg, pop their set, and then get in for 2,400 here. So that will go through, and we're just going to set this MST, pass back to them. MST is a bit worse than Heavy, but like, I mean, I don't know if they Heavy here. Like, I really feel like that set that they have is not the Heavy. Like, there's no way that set that they have is the Heavy, or else they would have fired it last turn probably. So I feel safe doing this. If they go for Heavy here, it's like kind of like a 2-for-2 trade. We also get to proc our Threatening Roar, so I'm feeling very good about that. They just go for a Dark Hole here, though, to clear the board, and then go for an Exiled, attacking in for 1,000 here. So that will go through. I mean, I don't really care about, you know, the Exiled there. We just MST that new back row, just in case it's something that actually does something here, because I really want to clear that Exiled Force this turn. And I feel like their first back row is just dead. That's just the vibes I've been getting from it. We will attack in with the Sidra here over the Exiled, and then attack in for 1,000 with the Sangan. We could have gone for limit removal here on the Sidra, but that doesn't really do much. It does 2,100 additional, driving them down to 14, but I think we can save the limiter here, honestly. But they're just going to set one, go for Snatch on our Sidra, attack into the Sangan here, deal 1,100, and we get a search off that. So we are going to grab, let's see what we grab here. We grab a Tomato here. So that's going to be pretty good for us because we can just sort of wall up with the Tomato here, get 1,000 every turn off the Snatch, and get more Darks Engrave as well. So that's sort of my reasoning behind going for the Tomato there. We gain 1,000 here. I feel like it's probably safe to go for an upstart. We go for upstart. They've chained the Dust Tornado now. I'm not quite sure why they did that at that timing there, but it's still ultimately fine. We draw into another T-Roar, so this is perfectly fine by us. But they're going to attack in to the set there, and we will get out another Mystic Tomato. So, you know, again, this is sort of the game plan here. And I could have gone for Stein last turn as well, but I feel like this is probably the better thing. Plays around more things. And the thing about a Chaos Control deck is that it doesn't necessarily have to go for Stein. As WinCon, it can sort of grind out wins when it's in a position like this. So we draw into a Chaos Orc. We're just going to go for the Chaos Orc there, bring it out. Now, we could banish the Sidra, but I feel perfectly fine just attacking into the Sidra, honestly. Use it up a back row if they've got it. And the Tomato can sort of wall up against what they have as well. So I'm fine going for this. That will indeed go through though, and now we're able to tack in for 1,400 here, dropping them down to 2,900. So we're going to pass back to them, and I feel very, very safe from this position. They go for Bazoo. They're going to banish 3, and then go for, oh, that was a misclick. They're not going for Comfy here on our hand. But we're just going Threatening Roar because next turn, the Chaos Orc can banish the Bazoo. So if they've got Return, they'd be forced to use it next turn to sort of like, protect themselves against what is a lethal, or actually it's not quite lethal. So either they've got Return, they could bring that back later. So maybe I shouldn't have gone for T-Roar here, but I do think it's fine going for T-Roar here. It looks like they've just got Comfy here to rip that last card out of hand. We've got Jinzo, though, and Jinzo is just going to lock up this game. So we'll banish that Bazoo with the Chaos Orc and then distribute over that for the Jinzo to attack in twice. If they've got a Karibo in hand, this at least drops them down to 500. But it looks like that, indeed, will be the end of the game. So very good stuff for the Chaos Control deck. Yeah, I mean, like, Bazoo is very, very powerful, and it definitely can give this deck a lot of trouble because it's a very, very aggressive deck and a very explosive deck. So don't take this matchup here as a sign that, like, this deck will always beat Bazoo, because I do think that the more explosive decks can just get in against the Chaos decks. But I do think that when you side against the more explosive decks, like with Threatening Roars or potentially Decrees, then it can potentially turn in your favor. But I do think that, like, I don't know, this Chaos Control does, it was, like, good. And I think it's a good deck overall. But it just feels, it feels like it's lacking something. It feels like it's lacking power. And I feel like power is really needed in this format, given the other decks running around. You can grind out your opponent over a fair course of games, but a lot of games get really aggressive really quickly. And you really want that explosive power to close out games before your opponent can end you. So I am not the biggest fan of this deck compared to some of the other decks that I've covered, but if you're looking for a more controlling game plan in this format, this is probably the best shell that you can have for a control style deck. But what do you think about this deck? Do you think that I'm sort of underselling it, or do you think that I'm overhyping it? Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with you all, as always. If you want to play games in this format or any other format that I feature on the channel, definitely head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. It's a great place to find games in this format or any other format that I've covered on the channel. If you want to support me directly, I also have a Patreon linked in the description as well. And if you join the Patreon and get shout out in these videos, a big shout outs to Tyler Compton, GeoMyFest, Rinswin, Porkchop Coon, Brendan Docker, and Dumpfrick. It really means a lot that you all support me this way and encourage me to make more videos like this. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.